Fear Switch, The Heart of Cali by Elton Thomas. Chapters 13 through 18. Chapter 13, Rising to Defend, Max's Stand Against Bullying. The school courtyard was bustling with students, voices overlapping in a steady hum as groups clustered together, discussing their weekend plans or hurriedly finishing assignments before the next class. Max was making his way across the courtyard, a sense of calm focus lingering from that morning's training at the dojo. He was finally beginning to feel at home with the rhythm of cali, his body finding a new kind of balance he hadn't known was possible. Today, he felt more grounded, like he belonged. His attention was caught by a familiar voice, a voice tinged with tension, quiet but unmistakably distressed. He scanned the courtyard and spotted Stacy near the far wall, her shoulders hunched, her arms wrapped protectively around her books. In front of her stood two boys, both larger than her, both sneering, their postures aggressive and unyielding. Max's heart clenched. He recognized them, Brian and Kyle, seniors who had gained a reputation for targeting anyone they perceived as weak or different. He watched as they loomed over Stacy, blocking her path, their laughter carrying an edge that twisted his stomach. He could see Stacy's discomfort, the way she tried to sidestep them, her gaze fixed on the ground, her lips pressed tightly together. "Hey, Stacy," Brian drawled, leaning in close, his voice dripping with mock sweetness. "What's wrong? Don't you want to talk to us?" Kyle snickered, nudging his friend, clearly enjoying Stacy's discomfort. "Yeah, come on, Stacy. We just want to be friendly. Isn't that right?" Stacy took a step back, her hands tightening around her books. Max could see the way her jaw clenched, the tremor in her shoulders. She looked trapped, cornered, the familiar fear and frustration flashing in her eyes. Max felt his own pulse quicken, a wave of anger rising within him, but he took a deep breath, steadying himself, letting the calm of his training settle over him. He approached, his movements purposeful but controlled, channeling the discipline and balance he had learned at the dojo. When he reached them, he placed himself between Stacy and the two boys, his stance steady, his gaze unwavering as he faced them. "Back off," Max said, his voice low but firm, his eyes locked on Brian. There was no trace of hesitation in his posture, only a quiet, commanding strength. Brian sneered, crossing his arms as he looked Max up and down, his expression filled with contempt. "Oh, look, the Tin Man's come to save the day. What are you going to do, Max? Hobble us to death?" Kyle chuckled, clearly amused, but Max didn't react to their taunts. Instead, he held his ground, letting his calm silence speak louder than words. He could feel the balance in his stance, the steady grounding of his feet, the control in his body. He didn't need to fight them. He only needed to show them that he wasn't intimidated. He drew on the techniques Andrew had taught him, the calm center that came from proprioception training. His body was relaxed but alert, his hands resting at his sides, his posture unyielding. He could see the flicker of uncertainty in Brian's eyes, the faintest hesitation as he realized that Max wasn't backing down, wasn't reacting the way they had expected. Stacy looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and relief. She stayed close to Max, her presence giving him a newfound sense of purpose, a determination that strengthened his resolve. "What's wrong?" Max said, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. "Are you scared of someone who actually stands up to you?" Brian's sneer faltered, replaced by a scowl as he took a step closer, trying to reassert his dominance. "You think you're tough, Max? Just because you took a couple of self-defense classes?" Max didn't flinch, didn't waver. He could feel his own heart beating steadily, the quiet strength that came from knowing he didn't need to prove anything. "It's not about being tough," he said, his tone even. "It's about knowing who I am. And I'm not someone who stands by while people like you pick on others." The calm conviction in his voice seemed to catch Brian off guard, a flicker of confusion passing over his face. Max could see the frustration building in Brian, the simmering anger that came from being challenged, from losing control of the situation. He knew that anger, knew the impulse to lash out, but he stayed calm, grounded in the principles of Cali. "You're not worth our time," Brian muttered, his scowl deepening. He glanced at Kyle, who shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain now that their power play had been disrupted. "Yeah," Kyle muttered, his gaze darting away. "Let's go." Brian shot Max a final glare, his jaw clenched, but he turned away, his shoulders tense, his posture defeated. The two boys walked off, their retreat a silent acknowledgement of Max's quiet strength, his refusal to be intimidated. Max let out a slow breath, the tension leaving his body as he felt the calm return, the steady balance he had learned to find within himself. He turned to Stacy, his expression softening, a gentle smile touching his lips. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Stacy nodded, her relief evident in her posture, the way her shoulders relaxed, her grip on her books loosening. "Yeah, thanks, Max. I didn't know what to do." He gave her a reassuring smile, his gaze warm. "You don't have to face them alone. You're stronger than they think, Stacy. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." Stacy's eyes brightened, a small grateful smile spreading across her face. She looked down for a moment, then met his gaze, her expression filled with a quiet determination. "You know, seeing you stand up to them like that, it makes me want to keep going, to keep learning. I want to be able to do that one day, to stand up for myself." Max felt a swell of pride, a quiet satisfaction that went beyond the moment, beyond the encounter. This wasn't just about defending Stacy. It was about showing her that she could find strength within herself, that she could stand tall, unafraid, even in the face of intimidation. They stood there for a few moments in companionable silence, the tension of the encounter melting away, replaced by a sense of shared resilience. Max knew that he had found something powerful in Cali, a strength that came not from brute force, but from control, from balance, from the decision to act rather than react. And in that moment, he saw that same strength in Stacy, a spark of determination that he knew would only grow. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the school building. "Let's get to class." Stacy smiled, her posture more confident, her steps lighter as they walked together side by side. She had faced something painful, something that had once made her feel small, but today, she was walking away from it stronger, her spirit lifted, inspired to keep going, to keep learning, to build her own strength. And as they made their way across the courtyard, Max felt a quiet sense of pride, not just in himself, but in the path he had chosen, in the strength he was discovering, a strength that allowed him to stand up not only for himself, but for those he cared about. He knew this was only the beginning, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, with courage, with control, and with an unwavering commitment to the principles he was beginning to make his own. Chapter 14. Raja's Discovery, a Threat from the Shadows. The dim light of the training room cast eerie shadows over the cracked concrete walls. Raja stood at the center, his tall, imposing figure cutting a dark silhouette against the faint glow of the single, flickering overhead light. Around him, his followers, the elite fighters of the Arnes, watched in silence, their eyes sharp, alert, each one waiting for the slightest signal from their leader. Raja held a pair of eskrima sticks in his hands, the polished, lethal wood gleaming faintly in the dim light. His grip was firm, practiced, each stick an extension of his own lethal intent. His face was a mask of focused calm, his eyes dark, intense, a storm of emotions hidden beneath the surface. Raja had been trained in the old ways, the brutal techniques of eskrima meant not for sparring or demonstration, but for survival, for killing. His gaze swept over his followers, his expression hardening, the faintest hint of a sneer twisting his lips. They were the best fighters he had trained, each of them ruthless, disciplined, unwavering in their commitment to the Arnes. They knew the ancient ways, the techniques designed to disable and disarm without hesitation. And they followed him with a loyalty born not of respect, but of fear. Raja moved, his body flowing into a series of swift, precise strikes. Each swing of the eskrima sticks a deadly arc of controlled violence. The movements were fluid, lethal, each strike calculated to exploit weakness, to end an opponent swiftly, efficiently. He could feel the familiar rush of power, the surge of control that came with each swing, each strike. It was a power he had come to crave, a power that defined him. As he finished the sequence, he turned to his followers, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Eskrima is a weapon," he began, his voice low but resonant, filled with an intensity that made each of them stand a little straighter. "It was born for battle, honed for war. Every technique, every movement is meant to destroy, to protect our legacy." His gaze narrowed, a flicker of anger breaking through his calm exterior. "But there are those who would twist it, soften it, turn it into something weak. They would strip it of its strength, of its purpose." He spat the words, his contempt evident, his grip on the sticks tightening until his knuckles turned white. One of his followers, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a nervous energy, stepped forward. "You're talking about that dojo, aren't you?" His voice was low, cautious, as though he feared the wrath of the mere mention of the place. Raja's eyes flashed, a predatory gleam in his gaze. "Yes," he replied, his voice dripping with disdain. "Cali Kai. They have taken our art, our sacred techniques, and turned them into something weak, something that defies everything we stand for. They call it peace, but it is nothing more than cowardice." He practically spat the last word, his disgust evident, his posture rigid with anger. He took a slow, deliberate breath, his face hardening as he fought to keep his emotions in check. The very thought of Cali Kai, of what Andrew Sonoda had done to his beloved art, was an insult he could not ignore. To Raja, eskrima was not something to be tamed or diluted. It was a weapon, a means of survival, a legacy passed down through blood and sacrifice. And Andrew had dared to strip it of its essence, to turn it into something soft, something that embraced peace. One of the younger fighters, a quiet but fierce woman named Mira, spoke up, her voice steady but respectful. "Why would he do it? Why take something as powerful as eskrima and try to make it gentle?" Raja's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. "Because he is a fool. He does not understand the true power of what he wields. He has allowed himself to be blinded by weakness, by ideals that have no place in our world." He paused, his gaze sweeping over his followers, his voice growing colder, more determined. "He is spreading a lie, a falsehood that will only weaken our legacy, and I cannot allow it." He lifted his eskrima sticks, his posture tense, each line of his body radiating barely restrained violence. "I will go to him," he said, his tone filled with a dark promise. "I will show him the true meaning of eskrima, of strength. And if he continues to spread his lies, if he insists on corrupting our art, I will end him." The room fell silent, each of his followers processing the gravity of Raja's words, the dark conviction in his gaze. They had seen Raja's fury before, had witnessed his ruthlessness in battle, and they knew that his threats were never empty. When he spoke of ending someone, it was not a metaphor. To him, Andrew Sonoda's peaceful interpretation of eskrima was not merely a divergence in philosophy. It was an affront to his identity, his purpose. Raja turned, his expression calculating as he gazed at his followers. "We are the true bearers of eskrima's legacy. We are the Arnes, and we will not allow our art to be corrupted by the weakness of others." His voice dropped, a deadly calm settling over him. "Prepare yourselves. When the time comes, we will make our presence known, and when we do, they will understand what eskrima truly is." He turned, moving through another series of strikes, his body flowing into each motion with a practiced ease that belied the deadly intent behind each movement. His arms swung with precision, the sticks cutting through the air like extensions of his own will. He could feel the strength in his body, the power that had been honed through years of training, through battles that had left scars both visible and hidden. His followers watched in silence, their expressions a mix of awe and fear as they took in the mastery of his movements, the raw, unrestrained power that radiated from him. To them, Raja was not merely a leader. He was the embodiment of Eskrima's deadly legacy, a force of nature that would stop at nothing to protect what he saw as sacred. As he finished the sequence, he lowered the sticks, his gaze distant, his mind already planning the steps that would lead him to Andrew. He would confront him, challenge him, show him that the path of peace was a lie, a betrayal of everything eskrima stood for. And if Andrew refused to abandon his peaceful adaptation, if he continued to spread his teachings, then Raja would do what was necessary to silence him. He felt a surge of satisfaction, a grim sense of purpose settling over him. This was his destiny, his duty to protect the legacy of eskrima, to ensure that it remained pure, untainted by weakness or compromise. And as he looked around at his followers, he saw the same determination mirrored in their eyes, the same commitment to the art they had all pledged their lives to. "Prepare yourselves," he repeated, his voice a low, ominous murmur. "The time is coming, and when it does, we will show them the true face of eskrima." With a final dark glance at his followers, Raja turned and strode out of the room, his movements purposeful, each step echoing with the weight of his resolve. The path was clear. He would find Andrew Sonoda, and he would remind him and the world of the deadly legacy of eskrima. Chapter 15. A Challenge of Life and Death. The dojo was bathed in soft afternoon light, a warm glow casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The students had just finished their daily training, their laughter and conversation filling the air as they put away their cali sticks, their spirits light after another lesson. For them, the dojo was a place of peace, a sanctuary where they could learn and grow, unburdened by the stresses of the outside world. Andrew stood near the back of the room, watching his students with a quiet pride. The warmth he felt each day as he watched them progress was immeasurable. They had come so far, each of them discovering a resilience within themselves, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with violence or intimidation. It was what he had hoped for when he first began teaching Cali Kai, a discipline that transformed strength into peace, confidence into compassion. As he watched, his gaze softened, and a small smile touched his lips. It was in these moments, when he could see the joy and fulfillment in his students' faces, that he knew he had made the right choice in shaping Cali Kai into something more than a martial art. It had become a way of life, a path of peace that embraced resilience over aggression, inner strength over brute force. But as the students began to file out, exchanging farewells and promises to return the next day, a strange feeling settled over Andrew, a sensation of tension, of unease, as if a shadow had fallen over the dojo. He couldn't quite place it, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, an energy that felt heavy, foreboding. As the last of the students left, he caught sight of a figure lingering near the door, barely visible in the dimming light. Andrew's heart tightened as he recognized him. Raja. The man was cloaked in shadow, his posture tense, his eyes sharp and focused, like a predator watching its prey. His presence exuded a menacing calm, a controlled intensity that sent a chill down Andrew's spine. Raja stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate, each step echoing softly against the floor. In his hand, he held a small, folded piece of paper, which he extended toward Andrew without a word, his gaze never wavering. Andrew accepted the note, his expression unreadable as he met Raja's gaze. He could feel the weight of the man's challenge, the dark intent that radiated from him, and a flicker of dread settled in his stomach. Raja's eyes were cold, devoid of compassion or restraint, filled only with a steely resolve, a deadly purpose. Without a word, Raja turned and strode out of the dojo, his footsteps fading into the silence, leaving Andrew alone with the note in his hand. For a moment, he simply stood there, staring at the folded piece of paper, feeling the weight of it, the dark promise it held. He knew, without even reading it, what Raja had come for. He had heard whispers of Raja's philosophy, his devotion to the original brutal form of eskrima, a philosophy that stood in direct opposition to everything Cali represented. With a steadying breath, Andrew unfolded the note, his gaze sweeping over the neatly scrawled words. It was a challenge, as he had expected, a demand for him to defend the purity of eskrima, to prove that his peaceful adaptation of the art had any worth. The terms were clear, concise, with no room for negotiation. A fight, a test of strength and will, in which only one man would walk away. Andrew's hand tightened around the note, his knuckles whitening as he absorbed the gravity of the challenge. Raja had not simply issued a challenge. He had laid down a gauntlet, a direct threat to the very foundation of Cali. He was determined to destroy everything Andrew had built, to force him to choose between the path of peace he had dedicated his life to and the ruthless violence that Raja revered. A battle to the death. It was not a concept Andrew took lightly. He had long rejected the idea that violence was the only path to strength, had chosen to believe in the power of discipline, control, and compassion. But as he stood alone in the empty dojo, a dark realization settled over him. If he refused, if he turned his back on this challenge, he would be placing his students in danger. Raja would see it as a weakness, an admission of guilt, and he would come after the dojo, come after the students, until he had stamped out every last trace of Cali. Andrew took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the walls of the dojo, where the symbols of Cali adorned the wood, a testament to his life's work, his commitment to peace. He thought of his students, of their laughter and determination, the way they had found strength not through violence, but through self-discovery, through connection. He could not let them suffer for his choices, could not allow Raja's twisted philosophy to destroy what they had built together. He folded the note carefully, slipping it into his pocket as he straightened, his expression set with a quiet resolve. He would not seek violence, but he would not abandon his students, nor would he allow Raja's threat to go unanswered. If he was to defend Cali, to protect the peace he had fought so hard to establish, then he would have to face this challenge, to confront the darkness that Raja represented. For the first time in years, Andrew felt the weight of his own doubts, the question of whether he could remain true to his principles in the face of such a threat. But as he took a steadying breath, he felt a calm settle over him, a sense of purpose that transcended fear. He had chosen this path, had dedicated himself to building something greater than himself, and he would defend it, not with hatred, but with conviction. He walked to the center of the dojo, his gaze steady as he surveyed the quiet, empty room, his mind already turning to the coming confrontation. Raja had challenged him to a fight to the death, but Andrew knew that his greatest weapon was not violence. It was control, restraint, a mastery that went beyond the physical. Cali had taught him to channel his strength, to wield his power with intention, and he would meet Raja's challenge not as a warrior of violence, but as a man of peace. As he stood alone in the dojo, the faint echoes of his students' laughter still lingering in the air, he made a silent vow. He would protect Cali, defend its principles, not with the brutality that Raja demanded, but with the strength and resilience that had become his own. And when the time came, he would face Raja not as an opponent, but as a reminder that true power lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to build, to endure. The shadows deepened as evening approached, casting long, dark lines across the floor. But Andrew stood steady, unshaken, a quiet force of resolve in the face of the darkness that threatened to consume everything he held dear. Chapter 16. Confessions and Wounds. Laurie's Story. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the dojo, filling the quiet space with a serene, almost golden light. Andrew had just finished his last class for the day, and the echoes of his students' voices had faded, leaving only a comfortable silence in their wake. He was tidying up, putting away the mats and gathering stray sticks, when he noticed Laurie standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the soft light from outside. Her face held a mixture of tension and sadness, an unspoken weight that was clear even from across the room. She shifted slightly, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze lowered as though she were unsure whether to stay or leave. Andrew paused, straightening up as he met her gaze, his expression open and welcoming. "Laurie," he said softly, a hint of concern in his voice. "Is everything all right?" She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his as she took a step into the dojo. There was something in her expression that told him this was no ordinary visit, no casual conversation. She was holding something back, a story that she had carried alone, a burden she had borne for far too long. "No, Andrew," she replied, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of emotion. "There's something I need to tell you. I think you deserve to know, especially after everything you've done for Max. I need someone to understand." Andrew nodded, sensing the gravity of what she was about to share. He gestured to the mats at the center of the room, inviting her to sit. Laurie lowered herself onto one of the mats, her movements slow, as though the weight of her memories was physically pressing down on her. Andrew sat across from her, his posture open, his gaze calm and encouraging. For a moment, Laurie stared at the floor, her hands resting on her knees, her fingers nervously twisting together. She took a slow, deep breath, gathering her thoughts, preparing herself for the painful story she was about to share. "It was a few years ago," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Max was just a kid, bright, full of life, obsessed with soccer. And Anton was my everything. We were happy. I remember that day like it was yesterday, but I wish I could forget." Her voice cracked slightly, and she paused, taking a deep breath as she steadied herself, willing herself to continue. Andrew listened in silence, his gaze steady, his expression filled with empathy, giving her the space to tell her story at her own pace. "We were at the park," Laurie continued, her voice trembling as she recalled the memory. "It was one of those beautiful sunny days. Max was playing with his soccer ball, running back and forth, practicing his kicks. Anton and I were playing frisbee, laughing, just enjoying each other's company. It was one of those perfect days, you know, the kind that feels too good to be true." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening as she relived the moment. And then, everything changed. Her voice dropped to a whisper, her gaze distant, as though she were watching the scene unfold in front of her, powerless to change it. Anton noticed a man walking quickly through the park. He seemed out of place, moving too fast, looking over his shoulder. Before we could make sense of it, we heard shouting. We turned, and there were police officers. They were yelling at Anton to get on the ground. Laurie's hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white as she relived the fear, the confusion. We froze. I tried to explain. "We're just a family, we're just here at the park." But they didn't listen. One of the officers told me to shut up, told me to back off. Anton, he just raised his hands. trying to ask them what was going on, why they were targeting us. Her voice shook as she recalled the moment, her words thick with emotion. It happened so fast. He lifted his hand for a second, just a second. And that's when they fired. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Andrew felt his heart clench, a wave of grief and horror washing over him as he imagined the scene, the sheer brutality of it. "They called it an accident," she whispered, her voice laced with bitterness, her gaze fixed on a point far beyond the walls of the dojo. "They said it was a mistake, a misinterpretation of his movements. But it wasn't. They didn't see us as a family, didn't see Anton as a man, as a father. They saw a threat. They fired, and in an instant, he was gone." Lori's shoulders shook as she struggled to contain the tears, the pain that had been bottled up for so long. And Max. Max was there. He saw everything. He was shot in the leg and Her voice broke, a sob escaping her as she buried her face in her hands, the grief overwhelming her. Andrew reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle, grounding. "Lori," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine the pain you've endured." She lifted her head, wiping her tears as she looked at him, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. After that day, everything changed. Max, he lost a part of himself. He was always so full of life, so full of dreams. And now, he's haunted by that memory, by the violence that tore his world apart. Her gaze softened as she looked down, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the mat. "I've tried to help him, tried to give him the strength to move forward, to rebuild. But it's hard. Every day I see the pain in his eyes, the struggle to find hope, to feel like he's still whole." Andrew listened, his heart heavy with the weight of her story, the depth of the trauma that she and Max had endured. He had always known that his students carried their own burdens, their own struggles, but hearing Lori's story, he felt a new level of understanding, a profound respect for the resilience they had shown. "Lori," he said gently, his voice steady, filled with a quiet strength. "You and Max, you've both endured so much, more than anyone should have to bear. And yet here you are. You're stronger than you realize, both of you." She looked up, meeting his gaze, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. Bringing him here, encouraging him to keep going, to keep fighting. I don't want him to live in fear, but I don't want him to forget either. I want him to be strong, but I want him to heal." Andrew nodded, understanding the complexity of her emotions, the duality of her hopes and fears for her son. "Healing isn't about forgetting," he said softly. "It's about finding a way to carry the pain, to let it be a part of who you are without letting it define you. Max is on that path, and so are you. You're both finding strength in the struggle, resilience in the face of pain." Lori's eyes softened, her posture relaxing as she took in his words, the warmth and reassurance in his gaze. "Thank you, Andrew. I don't think I could have done this alone." "You're not alone," he replied gently. "None of us are. Max is finding his way, and you are helping him more than you know. This journey isn't easy, but you're both walking it with courage. And that courage is what makes all the difference." She took a deep breath, a sense of peace settling over her as she absorbed his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that perhaps, with time, she and Max could find a way to live with the pain, to let it shape them without consuming them. As they sat together in the quiet of the dojo, a newfound bond formed between them, a shared understanding of the struggles they each carried, the wounds that had shaped them. In that moment, Andrew knew that he would do everything in his power to help them, to guide Max on his journey, to honor the strength that Lori had shown in the face of unimaginable loss. And as the last rays of sunlight faded, casting the dojo in a soft, shadowed glow, Lori and Andrew shared a silent promise, a commitment to healing, to resilience, to finding peace in a world that had shown them both the depths of pain. Chapter 17. Preparing for the Unthinkable, Steeling for Battle. The dojo was quiet in the early morning light, the soft, dim glow illuminating the familiar spaces with a tranquil peace. Andrew stood alone in the center of the floor, his bare feet rooted firmly on the polished wood. The stillness around him was a sharp contrast to the turmoil within. He took a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill his lungs, grounding himself in the calm he had worked so hard to cultivate. He tightened his grip on the hilts of his cali sticks, feeling the smooth, balanced weight in his hands. These sticks had once symbolized his commitment to peace, his belief that martial arts could be a path not of violence, but of self-discovery, balance, and strength. But today, they felt heavier, the weight of the challenge that lay before him pressing down on his shoulders, testing his resolve. Raja's note was still folded in his pocket, a stark reminder of the challenge he had no choice but to accept. The words were burned into his mind, a demand not just for a fight, but for a confrontation of philosophies. A clash between Raja's belief in eskrima as a deadly force and Andrew's vision of Cali as a means of peace. He began to move, settling into a practiced stance, his body loose and fluid, his gaze focused but calm. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing Raja's face, the cold intensity in his eyes, the disdain he held for the peaceful path Andrew had chosen. Andrew knew that Raja would not back down, that he was prepared to fight with a ruthlessness that could only end in bloodshed. But Andrew was not here to fight out of hatred or vengeance. He was here to defend the values he had built his life around, to show Raja that strength did not lie solely in destruction, that peace could be as powerful as any weapon. He took a deep breath, centering himself, feeling the calm settle over him like a protective armor. He began to flow through a series of movements, each one precise, controlled, the sticks gliding through the air in arcs that seemed to blend into one another. His body moved with an almost meditative grace, each motion a testament to the hours he had spent honing his skills, not for violence, but for mastery. He could feel the familiar rhythm building, the quiet confidence that came from years of discipline, of dedication to a path of resilience rather than aggression. As he moved, his mind drifted to his students, to the laughter and determination he saw in them each day. They were the reason he had chosen this path, the reason he had built Cali into something more than a martial art. He had taught them to seek strength not through dominance, but through control, through an inner calm that could withstand even the darkest moments. With each swing and twist, he imagined himself standing before Raja, not as an adversary, but as a reminder that violence was not the only way to assert strength. His movements became sharper, more precise, each one a reflection of his commitment to defending the principles he had spent a lifetime cultivating. In one swift motion, he swung his right arm in a downward arc, the stick slicing through the air with a sharp crack. He pivoted, twisting his body with a grace that spoke of years of experience, each movement calculated, intentional. The sticks felt like an extension of himself, a natural part of his body, moving with a fluidity that was both beautiful and deadly. But his heart remained calm, his mind focused not on the violence of the movements, but on the discipline they required, the balance they demanded. He knew that he could not let hatred or anger cloud his purpose, that he could not allow himself to be drawn into the darkness that Raja represented. His strength lay in his principles, in the quiet, unshakable resolve that had guided him through every challenge. As he continued to move, the sound of his breathing became a steady rhythm, grounding him, centering him. He could feel his muscles responding, each twist and turn a reminder of the power he held, not through aggression, but through control. He knew that he would need every ounce of that control when he faced Raja, that he would need to stay rooted in his principles, even when confronted with the darkness that Raja carried within him. His mind drifted back to the note, to the challenge that Raja had issued, a fight to the death, a demand for Andrew to defend the purity of eskrima. But to Andrew, eskrima was not just a means of survival. It was a path of growth, a journey toward self-discovery. He could not let Raja's twisted interpretation of the art overshadow the values he had instilled in his students, the principles that had defined his life. He took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he imagined facing Raja, not with hatred, but with the calm confidence that came from a life of discipline. He would not fight to destroy. He would fight to protect, to uphold the legacy of Cali, to show Raja that peace and resilience were as powerful as any weapon. As the morning light filled the dojo, casting long shadows across the floor, Andrew stood still, his breathing steady, his gaze unwavering. He had made his choice, and he would not waver. He would face Raja, not with anger, but with the quiet, unbreakable resolve that had defined his path. With a final, steadying breath, he lowered the sticks, his body relaxing as he let go of the tension and doubt. He knew that the path he had chosen was not easy, that the challenge ahead would test him in ways he had never faced. But he was ready, his heart grounded in the principles he had spent a lifetime building. As he stood alone in the dojo, a quiet strength settled over him, a calm resolve that went beyond fear, beyond doubt. He would face Raja, not as a warrior of violence, but as a protector of peace, a guardian of the principles that had defined his life. And when the time came, he would be ready. Chapter 18, Steadfast Resolve, Laurie's Commitment. The quiet hum of early morning filled Laurie's home as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting soft, golden patterns over the table. She stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, her gaze distant as she watched the lights slowly brighten. These early mornings had become her moments of reflection, where she could gather herself before the day truly began. Today, however, felt different. Today, her thoughts were centered not on herself, but on Max. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her reflections settle within her. Max had changed. She could see it in the way he carried himself, the new spark in his eyes, the way he approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose. It was subtle, but undeniable, a strength that seemed to grow with every practice at the dojo, every lesson he learned from Andrew. And as she stood there, she felt a mixture of pride and resolve bloom within her, a fierce, protective commitment to support him on this journey. When Max finally entered the kitchen, his hair tousled from sleep and his movements still heavy with the lingering drowsiness of morning, Laurie couldn't help but smile. She saw in him a resilience that she had always believed in, a quiet strength that was beginning to show itself in ways she hadn't expected. "Good morning, Max," she said warmly, her voice carrying a hint of pride she didn't try to hide. Max glanced up, offering her a sleepy smile, his gaze softening at her tone. "Morning, Mom." They ate breakfast together, a comfortable silence settling over them as they shared the familiar routine. But Laurie's thoughts were never far from the dojo, from the impact Cali was having on Max's life. She could see the way it was helping him, giving him something to hold on to, a purpose that went beyond the painful memories, beyond the struggles that had once seemed so insurmountable. After they finished eating, Laurie cleared her throat, breaking the quiet with a gentle but steady tone. "Max, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of how far you've come." Max looked at her, his expression one of quiet surprise, as though her words had caught him off guard. He lowered his gaze, a faint blush coloring his cheeks, but Lori could see the gratitude in his eyes, the way her words seemed to resonate within him. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I wouldn't have come this far without you, and without Callie Kai." Lori reached out, placing a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "Callie Kai is helping both of us, Max. It's not just teaching you strength, it's teaching me, too. Watching you grow, watching you find your way, it gives me hope. Hope that we can move forward, that we can find healing together." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling over them. Lori felt her own resolve harden, a commitment taking root within her that she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. She would support Max, stand by him, give him the strength he needed, even on the days when it felt impossible, because she believed in him, in the journey he was on, and in the peace he was finding within himself. Later that day, as they walked to the dojo together, Lori felt a quiet pride swelling within her, a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in years. The familiar path to the dojo had become a part of her life, a routine that she cherished, not just for Max, but for herself. She was beginning to understand that Callie Kai was more than just a martial art. It was a way of life, a philosophy that offered them both a path toward healing. As they entered the dojo, Andrew greeted them with his usual calm demeanor, his expression softening as he looked at Max, a hint of pride in his eyes. Lori could see the bond that had formed between them, the respect that Max held for his teacher, the way Andrew's presence seemed to ground him, offering him a stability that went beyond the physical. Andrew guided Max through his warm-up, each movement precise, controlled, a testament to the discipline that had begun to shape him. Lori watched from the sidelines, her gaze filled with admiration as she observed the way Max moved, the focus in his eyes, the quiet determination in his posture. She could see the growth within him, the resilience that had taken root, nurtured by the teachings of Callie Kai. As the lesson progressed, Andrew introduced a new technique, his voice steady and calm as he explained the movements. Lori watched as Max followed, his body moving with a newfound confidence, his stance steady, his grip on the hilts of the sticks strong and controlled. She could see the concentration in his eyes, the way he absorbed every word, every instruction, his mind focused, his heart open. Each swing, each block, each pivot held a purpose, a precision that spoke to the journey he had undertaken, the commitment he had made to himself. Lori felt her own resolve deepen, her commitment to support him strengthening with each passing moment. She would stand by him, every step of the way, offering him the encouragement he needed, the love that had always been his foundation. As the lesson came to an end, Andrew approached Lori, his expression thoughtful, his gaze filled with a quiet understanding. "Max has come a long way," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that filled her with a sense of peace. "And I know it's because he has you by his side." Lori nodded, her gaze drifting to Max, who was talking animatedly with a fellow student, his face alight with a joy she hadn't seen in years. "Thank you, Andrew," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given him more than just strength, you've given him hope. And I can't tell you how much that means to me." Andrew nodded, his expression thoughtful. Callie Kai is more than just a discipline. It's a path, a way of finding peace within ourselves. Max has embraced that, and it's helping him heal. But you're a part of that journey, Lori. You give him the strength to keep going, to keep believing in himself. As she left the dojo that evening, Lori felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet resolve that filled her with hope. She knew that the journey would not be easy, that there would be days of struggle, days when the weight of the past threatened to overshadow the progress they had made. But she was ready to face it, to stand by Max with unwavering commitment, to support him as he found his way forward. because for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace, a belief that they could move beyond the pain, that they could find healing together. And as she walked beside Max, she felt a quiet, unbreakable bond between them, a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead.